Have you ever felt cursed by your own awareness? There is a strange loneliness that comes when your eyes begin to notice what others cannot bear to see. It's not about seeing ghosts or miracles. It's about seeing truths. You begin to perceive the invisible architecture behind people's smiles, the fear behind ambition, the emptiness hidden inside noise. What once seemed normal starts to look like a carefully painted illusion. And while others keep dancing in the rhythm of distraction, you stand, still awake. Unable to return to sleep. Carl Jung said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. When you start perceiving that soul, yours and theirs, you also inherit its weight, the weight of contradiction, the weight of knowing that every human carries a secret wound disguised as a dream. Seeing that wound doesn't make you powerful, it makes you responsible, and responsibility for the awake often feels like exile. There's a moment when you realize that perception is not a gift. It's an initiation. The world you knew dissolves and you begin to move through layers of meaning that others cannot feel. Conversations become veiled performances. Relationships lose their easy charm. Even joy changes its texture. You can no longer laugh from the same place you did before, because you see now. And seeing means you can never fully belong again. But maybe that's the point. To see the invisible is to step outside the collective dream, even if it costs your comfort. If you've ever felt this strange detachment, as if you live between worlds, tell me in the comments. Let's speak the language that only those who see can understand. And if this voice resonates with something deep in you, subscribe, stay close. This journey is only beginning. Most people don't live in reality. They live behind a veil so thin that it feels real, yet so dense that it blinds them completely. It's woven from repetition. The same routines, the same opinions, the same fears dressed as certainty. This veil is not evil. It's protective. It keeps humanity asleep just enough to function. To question it is to risk unraveling the whole illusion. That's why those who begin to see through it are often called strange, detached, or broken. They are simply the ones who dared to notice the stitching. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, that deep reservoir where every myth, trauma, and desire of the human species hides. The veil is its surface. Society paints it with colors of productivity, pleasure, and progress. But beneath it lie ancient shadows whispering the same question. Who are you when no one is watching? Most cannot answer. So they stay behind the veil, where answers are ready-made and responsibility dissolves into routine. To perceive the invisible is to realize that every system, political, religious, psychological, is sustained by denial. People don't want truth. They want comfort. They want explanations that don't demand transformation. And yet, when your perception expands, you no longer have that luxury. You begin to see the fear behind authority, the hunger behind fame, the desperation behind love. You see that the world is not built on truth, but on agreements we silently make to avoid it. That realization can burn. It isolates. It changes the way you breathe, the way you move through crowds. But beneath the pain, there's a strange serenity, the quiet knowing that illusion is not your enemy. It's just the costume consciousness wears until it's ready to be seen naked. If you've ever felt that the world around you is just a theater where everyone plays the same role, stay with me. We're going to walk beyond the curtain together. At first, awakening feels like clarity. You think seeing through illusions will bring peace, But the deeper you look, the more you realize that the first illusion to dissolve is not the world, it's you. The mirror that once reflected your identity begins to crack. You. Notice how much of who you believed yourself to be was built to please, to belong, to survive. You start seeing the layers of masks you wore, not out of deception, but necessity. The ego was your armor, and when you see it for what it is, you begin to feel naked in front of your own gaze. This is where many turn back, because the moment you confront the false self, the comfort of knowing who you are disappears. You stand in front of the broken mirror and realize you are not the reflection. You are the one watching it fall apart. Jung described this as the meeting with the shadow, the hidden, rejected parts of our psyche that carry both our darkness and our dormant potential. Facing it feels like death because, in a way, it is. The death of the image, the birth of the witness. But there's beauty in this collapse. As the mirror shatters, the fragments reflect a wider sky. You begin to see yourself not as a fixed shape, but as movement, consciousness, trying to recognize itself. Every flaw, every fear, every regret becomes material for transformation. You no longer chase perfection. You start honoring your fractures because they let the light pass through. And yet, this clarity comes with a cost. You can no longer hide behind the mask of certainty. You start speaking less, listening more. You begin to understand silence not as emptiness, but as presence. That is the paradox of awakening. The more you see, the less you need to appear. Those who have looked into their own mirror and seen it break, you know this feeling. Leave a quiet word in the comments if this truth echoes inside you. Let's see how many of us are learning to live without reflections. There comes a moment in the journey when silence stops being peaceful and starts feeling like exile. You begin to notice the widening gap between yourself and the world you used to belong to. Conversations lose their color. Small talk feels like static. You nod, you smile, but deep inside, you're not really there. It's not arrogance, it's frequency. You've stepped out of the collective dream and now its language no longer fits your mouth. This is the solitude that Jung warned about, the price of individuation. To become whole, you must detach from the safety of belonging. When you awaken, you stop depending on external validation. But the freedom that follows is not sweet at first, it's heavy, because in seeing through illusions, you also lose the comfort they once gave you. Friends may drift away. Family may call you distant. You begin to wonder if awareness has made you cold, but it hasn't. It has made you transparent. And transparency cannot hide in the fog of unconsciousness. You start craving silence, not as escape, but as survival. In solitude, you can breathe without adjusting yourself to fit anyone's expectations. Yet even then, loneliness visits, not because you lack connection, but because you see connection differently now. You no longer cling to people, you sense them. You no longer chase love, you embody it. And this difference, though sacred, sets you apart. It's tempting to dim your light, to shrink your truth just enough to feel accepted again. But every time you try, your soul protests. It whispers, "Don't go back, you've seen too much." So you stay. You walk the quiet road between worlds, too awake to return, too human to transcend completely. It's a holy ache, this loneliness, a space where transformation ripens in silence. If you've felt this kind of solitude, the one that comes not from rejection but from awakening. Tell me in the comments. I want to know how you carry it, how you make peace with it. Because in sharing this silence, we may find we are not as alone as we thought. Carl Jung never intended to become a prophet. He was a scientist who wandered too far into his own psyche and came back with symbols instead of formulas. His descent into the unconscious, what he called the confrontation with the soul, was not a study, but a survival. He realized that true vision does not come from intellect. It comes from surrender. The visionary is not someone who sees the future, but someone who dares to see what the collective refuses to face. In Jung's writings, the visionary carries both blessing and burden. To see deeper means to stand alone at the edge of comprehension. Society often mistakes that solitude for madness, but the visionary knows that what is called madness is sometimes the soul's rebellion against a world that has forgotten its inner language. Jung himself walked that tightrope, between reason and mystery, between the clinic and the abyss. He learned that symbols are alive, that dreams speak in the grammar of eternity, and that light without shadow is blindness. The archetype of the visionary is born whenever someone refuses to look away. It's the artist who paints what others fear to feel, the writer who bleeds truth onto the page, the thinker who questions the sacred comfort of normality. Each of them carries a torch that burns through illusion. And that flame isolates as much as it illuminates. Vision demands sacrifice, of belonging, of certainty, sometimes even of peace. But there is purpose in that sacrifice. Jung understood that the visionary is not meant to escape the world, but to return and reveal it to itself. Their task is to translate the invisible into forms the sleeping can touch: art, words, presence. The visionary bridges the human and the divine, the known and the hidden. And though the world rarely thanks them, it slowly reshapes itself through their seeing. Perhaps you too carry fragments of that archetype. If you've ever felt burdened by insight or punished by depth, you may be living what Jung lived, the sacred tension between seeing and being seen. There is a silent trap waiting for everyone who begins to see clearly. After crossing the fog of illusion, you start to believe that clarity itself makes you special, that understanding the hidden layers of existence separates you from the rest. But this is where many seekers lose themselves. They mistake awareness for identity. They begin to wear their insight like a crown, forgetting that the purpose of seeing is not elevation, but integration. Jung warned about this subtle arrogance of the spirit. When the ego merges with the image of the awakened one, it creates a new illusion, even more seductive than the old. You start believing that you have transcended what others are still trapped in. You speak of truth, but you've quietly fallen in love with your reflection in it. The vision, once a window to reality, becomes a mirror again, this time polished with light instead of lies. Real vision has no owner. It flows through you, not from you. The moment you claim it, it begins to decay. True awareness is humbling. It strips you of every title, every spiritual identity, until nothing remains but presence. That emptiness, frightening to the ego, is the soil where real wisdom grows. Because when you stop needing to be someone enlightened, you finally become available to truth itself. This is the paradox. You can only see clearly when you stop needing to be the one who sees. The ego always wants to turn awakening into an achievement, a narrative, a badge of purity. But the soul seeks only sincerity, the quiet willingness to keep dissolving again and again. Every insight, no matter how luminous, must die before it becomes dogma. So, if your vision has made you feel, superior, pause. Breathe. Let the insight burn through your self-image until only stillness remains. The awakened path is not about knowing more. It's about being less defended, less certain, less separate. When your consciousness expands, the first thing it meets is pain. Not because truth itself hurts, but because everything false must dissolve in its light. Expansion is not ecstasy. It is exposure. You begin to feel everything. The sorrow you buried, the collective grief vibrating beneath daily life. The silent despair behind people's laughter. What you once called awakening now feels more like bleeding. Jung understood this paradox deeply. That illumination always reveals the shadow it had concealed. There is a quiet agony in seeing too much. You can't return to ignorance, yet the new awareness has not yet become wisdom. You stand in between, raw, vulnerable, unarmored. The world feels louder, sharper, more intimate and more distant all at once. Your empathy deepens, but so does your fatigue. You start to sense that every act of cruelty is born from blindness, and that blindness is universal. Compassion grows, but so does sorrow. This is the wound of expanded consciousness. The realization that awareness connects you to everything, including suffering itself. You may try to escape it through work, distraction, or even spiritual ideals. But every avoidance tightens the knot, because this pain is not a mistake. It's initiation. It's the friction required to expand the heart enough to hold the whole spectrum of existence, light and shadow, beauty and decay. Jung said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. He was right. Awareness breaks the walls that once kept you safe, and what floods in first is everything you never wanted to feel. The temptation here is to numb yourself again, to close your eyes and shrink back into comfort. But if you endure, if you stay with the ache long enough, something extraordinary happens. The wound stops being just pain. It becomes perception. You begin to see that suffering and awakening are not opposites but mirrors. The pain itself becomes sacred because it opens you to life's raw texture, unfiltered, unedited, unbearably real. If you've ever felt this, the tenderness of carrying too much truth, tell me in the comments. How do you hold your awareness without collapsing under it? Because maybe, just maybe, the wound was never meant to close. It was meant to stay open, so that light could keep entering through it. After the wound comes the work, not of healing it, but of transforming through it. This is the secret rhythm of inner alchemy, turning pain into perception, chaos into clarity, shadow into substance. Nothing is wasted in the hands of awareness. What once felt like destruction slowly reveals itself as refinement. The invisible forces that once haunted you now begin to serve you, shaping your understanding with the precision of fire. Jung called this individuation the process through which the unconscious becomes conscious, and the human becomes whole. Alchemy is not about escaping darkness. It's about giving it purpose. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start whispering, "What is this trying to teach me?" Slowly, the wound becomes a teacher. The pain becomes language. You begin to realize that enlightenment isn't about floating above the human condition. It's about descending fully into it, until even the shadows start speaking in light. The gold the alchemist seeks is not outside. It's hidden in the very matter they feared to touch. This transformation is subtle, almost invisible. Outwardly, your life may look the same. You still wake, work, walk among people. But inside, something shifts. Reactions turn into reflections. Anger becomes understanding. Loneliness turns into solitude. The very same emotions that once trapped you become the raw material of your evolution. You begin to trust the process, not because it's easy, but because it's true. There is a dignity in the struggle now, a quiet knowing that every breakdown carries a blueprint for becoming. The alchemy of the invisible doesn't demand perfection. It asks only that you stay honest with yourself when no one is watching, that you keep refining your perception until you can see divinity in what once seemed unbearable. Because when darkness becomes transparent, when pain becomes light, you discover that nothing was ever against you. It was all part of the fire that was teaching you how to shine. After the long descent into shadow and silence, something subtle begins to shift. You start to feel the pulse of ordinary life again. Footsteps on the pavement, voices in cafes, sunlight through curtains. The world you left behind hasn't changed, but you have. Your perception has stretched beyond the limits of judgment. You no longer divide life into sacred and profane, awake and asleep, light and dark. Everything just is. The noise of existence now feels like part of a larger harmony. And for the first time, you can move through it without needing to escape. Jung believed that the purpose of individuation was not isolation, but return. The awakened one must re-enter the collective, carrying the awareness earned in solitude back into the everyday. This is harder than awakening itself. It demands humility, to speak again in the language of the world without losing the silence inside. You begin to realize that true wisdom is not about detachment. It's about participation without illusion. You no longer need to preach truth. You simply embody it. You walk through crowds and see not strangers, but fragments of yourself, each one fighting invisible battles, each one asleep in a different dream. Compassion replaces critique. You don't need to fix the world anymore. You only need to be fully within it. That presence alone begins to transform everything it touches. This is the quiet revolution of awareness. It spreads not through force, but through resonance. Returning doesn't mean forgetting the darkness. It means carrying it with reverence like a lantern made from your own wounds. The same pain that once exiled you now connects you. The same solitude that once isolated you now roots you in peace. You are no longer running from the world, nor chasing transcendence. You are home, everywhere. Those who've walked this spiral of awakening know that coming back is not the end. It's the beginning of a gentler strength. If this truth touches you, take a breath and remember, the journey was never about escaping the world, but about learning how to see it clearly and love it anyway. In the end, you realize that the curse of seeing was never a curse at all. It was the invitation life had been whispering to you all along. To wake, to remember, to feel. What once felt like exile now feels like belonging to something infinite. The pain that opened your eyes also opened your heart. Every wound that tore through, illusion became a doorway to meaning. Awareness didn't separate you from the world. It dissolved the distance that blindness had built. To see the invisible is to live in constant dialogue with mystery. You stop demanding answers and start trusting the questions themselves. You learn to walk through uncertainty with a quiet confidence, Knowing that clarity is not the goal, presence is. Jung understood this deeply. The light of consciousness is not about banishing the dark, but about entering it without fear. You are not here to be pure. You are here to be whole. And wholeness is messy, it laughs and cries in the same breath. It knows that awakening is not an escape from humanity, but its fulfillment. You still stumble, you still doubt, but now, every fall feels sacred, every silence feels alive. You start to notice the subtle grace hidden in imperfection, the way life keeps teaching through everything, even the unbearable. The so-called curse was only the weight of awareness learning. How to carry itself with grace. This is the secret ending of every awakening story. You never transcend the world. You begin to love it from a deeper place. You stop seeking light and start becoming a vessel for it, quietly, humbly, invisibly. That's the disguised blessing, the transformation that nobody sees but everyone feels. If you've walked this far with me, it means you've seen something of yourself in these words. Leave a comment. Tell me what truth found you here. Give this video a like if it touched a part of your journey. And if your spirit wants more, subscribe, stay close and watch the next reflection. The path doesn't end here. It only deepens.